In this episode of PulsePoint, we'll update you on these topics. More than 100 children have changed their New Zealand birth certificate to the opposite sex in the year since the new law came into force. A US court has ruled in favor of a teacher who was forced to use trans pronouns. There's a new video from PragerU entitled Trans Kids, the Medical Scandal. The Law Commission has suggested special new protections for transgender and non-binary people. And finally, 9-year-old model with Down syndrome is spreading joy wherever she goes. Welcome to PulsePoint, the latest media stories and research related to family and society that you need to know about. It's time to cut through the spin and uncover the real issues. I'm Tambi Stowers. Children are changing the sex on their birth certificates since the new law came into force on the 15th of June last year, and they're doing it without parental or guardian consent. Now, almost 900 people in the total have changed their birth certificates to their self-identified gender. According to the Official Information Act data gained by Family First from the Department of Internal Affairs, the number of people who have changed their gender on their New Zealand birth certificate in the first year of the new law is 15 and unders were 47, 16 and 17-year-old 66, 18 plus they had 776, and the total is 889. And 2 teenagers in the 16 and 17 age group have made the change without parental consent, instead relying on a letter of support from a suitably qualified third party, which is undefined. Demand to be recognized as a female was greatest with 445, followed by male 302 and non-binary 142. Now, there's no limit to the number of times you can change the gender on your birth certificate, and ironically, you can reapply to revert to the sex recorded at birth. Bob McCoskrie, the CEO of Family First New Zealand, says, by choosing your own gender in your birth certificate, the certificates have become an object of unscientific gender ideology and effectively tells medical professionals that they got it wrong at the time of birth. Circumstances may change, but a historical document should not be able to be changed. You can now read more on the new law by going to birthcertificates.nz. Last week, a court in Ohio in the U.S. ruled in favor of a Christian teacher who was forced to use trans pronouns. Hired as a full-time English teacher at the end of 2021, Vivian Gurarty had resigned from her position in 2022 after being told to use the students' preferred pronouns. Now, she argued in court that the use of pronouns didn't reflect the child's biological sex and would force her to embrace the concept of gender identity against her religious belief that God created 2 unchanging sexes, male and female. The court held that the school had forced her to wade into a matter of public concern and that compelled speech was not pursuant to her ordinary job duties. Now, of course, this case in the US is in contrast to a similar case here in New Zealand last year when a high school math teacher had his teaching registration cancelled after he refused to use the preferred pronouns and the name for a 14-year-old student who was in the process of transitioning from a biological girl to a boy. Now, the Teaching Council in Aotearoa, New Zealand said that teachers must not use their authority to undermine the personal identity of their learners or to inappropriately influence them. But apparently, they have no problem with Inside Out or the radical RSC curriculum influencing and undermining students. Interestingly, a nationwide poll last year found significant opposition to that decision, which resulted in a teacher losing his teaching license. 2 in 3 Kiwis, that is 65%, said the teacher shouldn't have lost his license, and only 16% said he should have. Now, this polling reveals that majority of New Zealanders are becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the gender ideology curriculum and the gender being ramped down in some schools, its effect on the teaching profession, and the coercion it's placing on teaching professionals to tell a biological lie. Why do the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and many other medical associations recommend treatment that will disfigure and possibly sterilize a healthy child's body? Now, over the past decade, the incidence of gender dysphoria has increased 5,000%. What changed? Now, Dr. Mariam Grossman, author of Lost in Trans Nation, a child psychiatrist's guide out of the madness and senior fellow at Do Not Harm Medicine, shares how the medical association has been hijacked by a political crusade determined to erase the very notion of male and female, and have become mouthpieces of the gender zealots' radical theories, which says individuals construct their own reality. If a girl feels she's like a boy, she is one. Hormones and surgery are the only solutions to gender dysphoria. If a girl wants to grow a beard and have her breast removed, she has the fundamental right. And those are the premises of so-called gender-affirming care. Now, here is the video of Dr. Miriam from PragerU explaining the grounds of the medical scandal.
It rests on one small study done in Holland 30 years ago with only 55 subjects. The primary entry requirement was severe gender distress from early childhood. The subjects were given puberty blockers, opposite-sex hormones, and occasionally surgery. After 18 months, some subjects reported modest improvement. The study had no control group and was never replicated. So for those and many other reasons, it's considered seriously flawed and unreliable.
Now, here in New Zealand, trans activists and left-wing media are concerned about the delay in the Ministry of Health's evidence brief on puberty blockers, which has been delayed from the end of last year and is still not released. The activists question why the delay? We believe the reason is because Te Whatu Ora Health in New Zealand's intended statement was completely at odds with the CAS report commissioned by the NHS in the UK and released earlier this year, which thankfully resulted in puberty blockers being discontinued in the UK. Now, gender activists, including Patha in New Zealand, were completely undermined and their credibility destroyed by this scientific report. It is hoped that our young people will be finally protected from chemicalization and confusion when the new briefing is ultimately released. The Law Commission is currently undertaking a review, asking whether there should be specific anti-discrimination laws or protections for those who are transgender, non-binary, and others. This review centers around expanding the Human Rights Act to include the term gender and gender-based rights specifically. Now, this poses major problems like clashing with sex-based rights, impacts freedom of speech, and sets the precedent that laws can be based on belief rather than empirical evidence and observable reality such as biological sex. Now, we do have an opportunity to make a submission up until 5 p.m. on Thursday. Family First is submitting a brief set of comments, and we encourage you to consider making a personal submission as well. Now, while we absolutely encourage you to make a submission, it is important to note that the real battle will be if and when a bill is put before Parliament to vote on. Now, the Law Commission will merely make recommendations that the government can accept or reject. That's when the real work will begin. Unfortunately, the Law Commission is highly likely to recommend special protections for those wanting to change their sex and punishment for those who oppose the ideology. And finally, a talented 9-year-old British model named Alice Price-Jones is starring in a UK supermarket's national ad campaign, as reported by The Mirror. Alice Price-Jones has Down syndrome, but her condition is not stopping her from spreading joy wherever she goes, according to her mother, Vicky Price-Jones. Now, when Alice was born, Price-Jones and her husband were only presented with the negative aspects of Down syndrome and the possible defects their daughter could suffer from. Now, despite the doctor's advice on all the medical issues that she might have, according to Price-Jones, Alice has the unique ability to live joyfully and to give that joy to others. Now, Alice Price-Jones' parents gave her the chance to live, and now she embraces an exceptional life. Yet many babies in Down syndrome are never born, especially in the UK and in other countries including Denmark and Iceland, where almost all babies with Down syndromes are killed in the womb by abortion. And sadly, it happens here in New Zealand as well. So it's time to change the medical culture narrative about life with Down syndrome, as the Price Johns and many others are. And that's the latest episode of PulsePoint. You can check out all these stories and more on our website, familyfirst.nz. We'll keep watching the news so that you don't have to. We'll see you next time.